the ultimate goodness of any gift needs to be measured on an eternal scale. Good morning, y'all. Welcome to Coffee with Connect. We get together on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 9:30, and we get into God's Word together, and we have our coffee together. And I'm glad that you joined me today. My mug's just a simple orange mug. Quite frankly, I forgot to bring in the one that I was going to use today, and so I'm using this one again because I have quite a few mugs here. So, and it works. It kind of matches and all that stuff. So we're going to keep going through the book of James here. James chapter 1, verses 16 through 18. As we're just continuing to go through the book of James, and pray, read, think, write, and do is our method as we look through the scriptures. And so we're doing kind of a little chunk of verses at a time sequentially through the book of James. And so as we look at these two verses today, I hope that you prayed and ask the Lord to show you something as we get into his word. I'm in the NIV, beginning of verse 16 in James chapter 1. It says this: "Don't be deceived, my dear brothers and sisters. Every good and perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of the heavenly lights, who does not change like shifting shadows. He chose to give us birth through the word of truth, that we might be a kind of first fruits of all he created." So if you've been with us through the beginning of the book up to now, you can kind of see like progression of James, like leading up to this, how he talks at the beginning about having joy in the tough times and the trials and the testing, and then how God gives us wisdom in those moments, and the value that we should place on stuff versus our heavenly perspective, and then being resilient in those tough times, and to not be deceived by the temptations, which he says again here. You know, he builds on all of that, and then he goes and says that every good and perfect gift comes from above. So he's talked about kind of struggling through the trials, saying, but yeah, the good things, every good and perfect gift, meaning nothing from our sinful nature is going to give us anything that is completely good and perfect. Doesn't mean there's not going to be good things in our life that, you know, or anything like that, but anything that is good and perfect, the good and perfect gifts, those come from above, which in turn then should give us a heavenly perspective, right? Said another way maybe is that like the ultimate goodness of any gift needs to be measured on an eternal scale, right? Something that may seem to be only good, for example, winning a boatload of money in the lottery, might in fact turn into our destruction. Not every time, but it could. And so it's that kind of perspective that I think James is really pushing us toward, that we need to have. So what's God saying to you through all of this? When you read these couple of verses and you maybe look at some of the things going on in your life or not going on in your life, what do we do with this then? See, the goodness of God is consistent. It is constant. It never varies. It never wavers. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we're looking at all this. As you know, James says this, that he doesn't change like shifting shadows. Like shadows change, it shift and move. That's not God. God never changes. He doesn't mature or grow. He's not in process like we are. We're in the process of growth and maturing and learning more. Like God's not like, yeah, I need to probably read up on that. No, that's not God. Previous verses show us that our will, the will of humankind, that brings sin and death. But the will of God, who is good and perfect and is consistent and constant in all things, that the will of our good God brings salvation. And so when we see the gifts of God versus what the world gives us, we can know where they're coming from. We can know that they're coming from God. How? Well, how we're measuring it. How it's what is ultimately produced by it. Because if it's consistent and constant with the character of God, if it's consistent with the character of God, never changing God who loves you, then you know it's from the Lord. And then how do we know if it's consistent with the character of God? By doing exactly what we're doing right now. Getting into his word, getting to know him more and more and more every day. And that is measuring on a heavenly scale. So thanks for joining me. And I hope that you'll like the video. You'll subscribe to the channel. Share this with someone that needs it. Join me again here next time so that we can have our coffee and connect to Christ, community, purpose, and God's word together. See ya.